I'm your host, Scott Norton, and welcome to At Large. On this show, I talk to world-class creatives who use business to bring their ideas to life. We'll hear about their creative practices, their most interesting stories, and the lessons that'll inspire you the way that they've inspired me. My guest today is Clare Vivier. Clare is a celebrated fashion designer and entrepreneur known for her eponymous brand, Clare V. Clare has quietly yet undeniably reshaped the landscape of accessories, blending timeless French chic with modern California cool. Known for spontaneity and minimalist elegance, Clare's designs have amassed a cult following, with thousands of people lining up in the early hours of the morning to access her annual sample sale. We'll hear about Clare's creative process and inspiration, her intuitive human-centered leadership, and how she's beat the odds to succeed in her notoriously challenging industry. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Clare Vivier. Welcome, Clare.
Thank you, Scott. So happy to be here.
The mission of your brand is to make inspired and inspiring products, create a kind, collaborative workplace, and build a business committed to positive change.
Correct.
And so we're going to talk about those three things today.
Okay, let's do it.
I was putting my questions together, and then I discovered that mission statement of yours and noticed that they all kind of like fit into those different areas. So excited to get into it. I'd love to start with the origins of your own brand, Clare V. Mm-hmm. And how did you first go about turning an idea into reality?
So I started with laptop bags, and I knew how to sew. I took sewing classes in grade school, as many of us used to do, because we used to have home ec classes. And it was something that I took to, and I really liked the challenge of sewing and the way that the like puzzle of putting things together and making things in reverse and things like that. It takes a strange part of your brain to do that. So I had been sewing throughout my adult life a little bit. And then when I was working in French television with my husband, I started to make my own laptop bags because I didn't think there were any cute ones on the market that I wanted to buy for myself. So I started to make envelopes, padded envelopes. And then I thought, oh, there's a market for this because I'm sure there's other people like me who aren't finding what they're looking for. And started to make them for my friends, and then made a website. And the website then I started to get press, try to reach out to friends who were editors and things. And yeah, I just started with a website. That was the first step into the business side of it.
And so you basically created these bags to solve your own problem in a way.
Yes.
That there were no stylish laptop bags in the market.
That I wanted to carry, yeah.
And you created something that was kind of like a padded envelope?
Yeah. Except I would get really tripped up on the measurements of laptops because there were so many different laptops. Mm-hmm. And even at the time, which was a long time ago, and then, of course, Apple would come out with a new laptop every year, so the size would change. So it would always kind of break my brain that I'm like, well, how can I ever do this and create snug-fitting envelopes if they're going to change the size every year, and then everyone has a different size? It's funny because when you think back at the origins of your business, and the problems that you thought were going to be problems, which eventually are just not problems at all, and you have completely different problems. I remember that being one of my main concerns. And little did I know that, years later, I would barely be making laptop envelopes, and the size would not matter at all because I just got out of that business. It wasn't my path for this business.
Right. Yeah. And now, of course, like the other makers of accessories of like laptops and phones, they love the fact that the sizes change every year because that means they get to sell another case.
Correct.
Or sell another bag.
Correct, yeah.
But you wanted something more timeless, or you weren't necessarily thinking about it so transactionally.
No, because, yeah, and this is probably interesting for your podcast because I think maybe well, I know you interview a lot of entrepreneurs and business people, so I was really coming at it from a maker's point of view, and I was sewing the bags myself. Eventually, I didn't come at it from a fashion background at all. I knew nothing about fashion production, anything like that. And when it got to the point where I didn't want to sew the bags anymore, and I thought I shouldn't be doing this anymore because I want to change my designs. My desires are more advanced than my skill level. I went looking for production here in Los Angeles and found my first factory. And I would go to this factory every day, and it was kind of like my education in production by going to this factory every day. And thankfully, they let me do that because it was a family-owned factory, and they really appreciated the fact that I knew how to put things together. And but I say that because I wasn't coming at it from the point of like production overseas and when you were going to be changing the size of things I wasn't thinking of it that way. I was thinking of making beautiful objects. So the beautiful laptop bag that your laptop would go into, that you felt proud carrying, and that you felt, I don't know, it just brought some kind of joy that it fit in with your outfit or your aesthetic.
So let's talk about that too, because everyone's like concept of stylish, right, or beautiful is different. And you've obviously, with your designs, have struck a chord, right? Mm-hmm. And now the brand has produced, I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of pieces, or
probably millions at this point.
Probably millions of pieces. And so you were solving a kind of a problem for yourself to create something stylish for you as a professional.
Yeah.
What was the sort of like positioning or the aesthetic that you were kind of putting out into the world that you stumbled upon, that you think kind of took off?
Well, it was my own aesthetic. I really have always loved fashion. I've always loved expressing myself through my attire and through my clothing and my accessories. So it was creating things that I wanted to carry, and I was always confident in the fact that I had a certain style or taste that was probably something that other people would like as well. So I think it's having the confidence to trust myself and my own style sensibility, and then also finding the inspiration from my surroundings. You know, we've been in Los Angeles. I started my company in Los Angeles. That's where we still are. There's always been this element of Los Angeles in my company, but also my husband's French, and we spend a lot of time in France, and I love the French fashion, the history of French fashion, and sorry for the cliche, but the je ne sais quoi of the French woman.
I knew it would come up at some point in this conversation.
Sorry, but there is something about that chicness of classic French women. And so, you know, those two elements combined of this French chic and classicness, but also the freedom of Los Angeles, and having not being in any kind of fashion race, because that's how I often feel in New York or Paris, where you feel like you're really in the fashion industry. In Los Angeles, you don't feel that way at all. You feel very free to create whatever is inspiring you.
And to self-express.
Yeah.
What would you say are your stylistic inspirations that has driven the aesthetic of the brand?
Well, again, it always starts with things that I want to be carrying myself, and I've got a great team with me of my design team are all people who I trust and whose taste I really like as well. So when we're designing something new, you know, there's always great people that I can ask their opinion on, and I really trust them. So first and foremost, it's design. The inspiration comes from things that I'm seeing out in the world and that I feel like we're missing in our collection, and things that I want to be carrying. And then there's always the question of what makes it Clare V. That's always, once we have designed something, it's like sometimes it comes back to us from a sample from one of our factories, and it'll come back and it'll be like, it's beautiful, but what makes it Clare V? And we'll have to change it in some way. And kind of, I always say funnily enough, it might sound funny, but I always say, how can we mess it up a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I don't think of our brand as being extremely perfect. There is a perfection to it, but it's almost perfectly imperfect. And we have this t-shirt, this sweatshirt that we've had for years. We have a lot of French phrases on our sweatshirts and t-shirts. And one of them is bourgeoisie sauvage. And that's always like, people are always like, what does that mean? What do you, and to me, that is a strange translation of perfectly imperfect when you consider bourgeoisie is, obviously we know what bourgeoisie is. It's a educated class. It's a middle class. It's the people who are buying these objects of a certain price. And then we liked that word because we like the letters and we like how the word looks. And me and my art director are always looking at graphics and how letters look and what words we think are beautiful. Bourgeoisie is a beautiful word, but then how do we mess that up? How do we mess up bourgeoisie? So we thought of bourgeoisie sauvage, which means wild, basically, in French. So in some way, that's kind of a different way of translating perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
If that's not stretching it too much.
Are you familiar with the concept of wabi-sabi?
Yes.
What you're saying reminds me of this idea of like a Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi.
Yes.
Where things are orderly and beautiful and perfect, but there is one thing that is off, right?
Yeah.
Or asymmetrical or imbalanced. And that's kind of what makes it human.
Yes. And that's what I feel like is Clare V. And we started off exclusively made in California, which I've always really loved because we could visit our factories and have this real direct contact with our QC process and everything. We now make product all over the world, but sometimes when things come back from other countries, and let's say even Italy, we make some bags in Italy, and everyone always talks about Italian leatherworks and how beautiful they are. Sometimes when they come back from Italy, they're too perfect. And they look too clean and it almost is like, no, like this isn't, what can we do?
Yeah.
Can we take the edge paint off so you can see the hide of the leather? Can we, make a hand stitch somewhere so you can feel the hand stitch element? Something.
Because when things are perfect in the digital age, they blend in.
Yeah.
They become invisible.
Yeah.
And so you have the perfection, or at least the quality of construction. So the seams, the material choices, those are solid. But then you kind of expose the apparatus in a way, or somehow mess it up a little bit so that
so it feels there's a hand touch element.
Yeah.
And I feel like everyone who works at Clare V knows that, and we know that there's some kind of life to it. There's life to the product.
Over the years have amassed, a proper cult following. Like people will kind of bandy that term around as a way of, describing their own brands and products. But you really have a cult following with long lines at sample sales starting early in the morning and kind of creating
we heard that the first people arrived at 2 a.m.
bourgeoisie sauvage.
Yeah.
All clamoring. What do you think you've tapped into that has electrified people in this way?
I don't know. So I'm talking to you 2 weeks after our once a year sample sale that we have downtown at the Row, and this is when, we've got the 14 stores and we're sold around the world, and so I do travel a lot and I do meet a lot of people. But this sample sale is very particular because of it's really the die-hard fans, and maybe these. Maybe this is where the term cult that you just brought up might apply, because people do come in the middle of the night to start lining up for it and then are waiting in a line that is 4 or 5 hours long to get in. And it's such a special experience for me because I'll go outside and I'll talk to the people in line and I'll say hi to them and say thank you for coming and, ask them what they're hoping to get, and that's when they'll talk to me about what is making them come, and they're all in such a good mood. Everyone is so happy to be there, and it's such a strange thing for me because I couldn't imagine waiting in a line for 4 hours and being in a happy mood, but they talk to people in line and they make friends in line, and they're all part of the same joy. They're all reacting to something that brings them joy. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's this sense of joy that they get. I'm hesitant to say why they might be following me or the brand. I like to think of it as they're following it because they love the product.
Yeah. And in reality, like so many of these things, human desire is not really logical. If you ask people why they like something, you get the answer that they give you, right? What they think, but you don't ever really get the answer. And so I love to talk to creatives and entrepreneurs about like kind of how the success that they've created, how it works. But more often than not, you don't know the mechanism of how it works. It's somewhere deep in culture. It's somewhere deep in the human psyche. But I think that answer of joy is a truer answer than any. Because if you're seeing people's eyes light up and you're seeing joy, that we need those things in our life. And that's undeniably a magnet. And
maybe it's also authenticity, and I know that's another term bandied about. Really, everyone talks about authenticity and brand, but
it's mostly overused. And I think you do have authentic expression in this.
I really feel like we do, and I feel like when I'm there meeting people, it does feel authentic. They do know that I carry the bags and that I've created the bags and that I am there now selling them and moving boxes around and, helping them find what they're looking for. And they see my team members, the president of my company works the sale, the other designers are working the sale. Like everyone is just there. It feels like a very community building experience.
You said you learned how to sew in school, and then you sewed this to solve your own problem, a laptop bag. And over the years, you have now migrated a bit away from, you've migrated away from doing the production yourself.
Correct.
Do you still make prototypes yourself? And it's okay if
sometimes it has happened in the not too distant past that I will sew something myself. I no longer have my industrial sewing machine. So I have my little Bernina sewing machine, which was the first sewing machine I bought when I found $400 on the street and knew that I was going to buy myself a nice sewing machine so I could start my laptop bag business.
Whoa, you found $400 in the street?
Yeah, I lived in Oakland at the time, and I was walking down the street with my husband. And I had dreams of starting this bag line, but I had a really shitty sewing machine, and I didn't really have a lot of dispensable cash, so I didn't know how I was going to buy a better sewing machine. And I was walking down the street and looked down, and there were 4 $100 bills, and I thought, I'm buying myself a sewing machine. And I went that day and bought a sewing machine.
Oh my gosh, that's kismet.
That's really how it started.
Wow, yeah. Like manna from heaven. That was your basically your seed capital was discovered.
Exactly, that was my seed capital.
On the streets of Oakland with $100 bills.
Yeah. So I still have that machine, and I'll occasionally create some kind of prototype at home with that machine. But mostly it's our factories creating the samples.
I feel like whatever's made on that machine must be imbued with some incredible aura of kismet.
I would hope so. We used it recently. Yeah. Yes, I love that machine so much. It has produced hundreds of bags for me and stayed up all night with me. And those early days when you're doing something that you love, and I'll speak for myself. When I was first making these bags, and I would stay up all night doing it, not being tired at all, and loving the idea of putting things together and the way that things work, and sewing and making things in reverse, and your brain is working in that crazy way. That's when I knew if I could follow this passion, this would be what I would want to do with my life. That was it for me.
That's when it clicked, and it became this, almost like you became like a heat-seeking missile or some sort of just an invisible tractor beam pulling you towards this.
Yeah, and again, I didn't have any starting capital or anything like that. So there was many years when I didn't know if it was actually going to work or if I was going to be able to do this for a living, but I kept trying and kept at it, and eventually, I say I started in 2008, but I didn't hire my first employee until 2010, and it was still out of my house at the time. And each day is you're just putting one foot in front of the other.
And so my question about the sewing, you started by manufacturing yourself, and then you did prototyping, and now looking back on these last, I guess is it 16 years now?
Yes.
Do you draw from the history of, I guess, what would we call it, saddlery? I mean, what is the discipline?
Saddlery. Yeah.
How do you
there's a
draw
great appreciation for it. I love all that stuff. I love, we spoke earlier about perfection and how I eschew it a little bit from Clare V, but I have a deep appreciation for perfection in this type of work. And I've been to visit a few times. 2 times I've gone to visit Vuitton factories.
You were invited?
One time invited to a factory in France, and one time invited to the factory here in Southern California. And I love watching those artisans at work. They're making luxury and very, very, very perfect objects. And I love watching them do that. That's the people who are so skilled at their craft is a fascinating thing to see. But it's not that I don't want Clare V bags to be perfect. There has to be something else that makes it kind of...
Oh, yeah, of course. I dressed up for you today.
I know.
Yeah, in fact, I brought sunglasses so that we could look straight out of a
You really do look
Godard
very
film if you
chic.
want to, yeah.
Oh, these are cute.
Those are French, in fact. Yeah, let's see how you look in those.
Who makes these?
Jimmy Fairley, which is a French brand.
Yeah, very French brand, yeah.
I decided
Did you
not
buy
to
them in
bring
Paris?
the Gaulois inside because, we don't want to stink this place up. But in a perfect world,
Too bad.
yeah, I'd have an unfiltered cigarette and
Yeah.
some sort of an ornery.
You look very French right now, I have to
thank
say.
you. Thank you. Yeah. Glad I can pull it off. I was in Paris fairly recently, and I just thought to myself, this is the city to end all cities.
Yeah.
The civil engineering there, it's like they're showing off what's possible.
Yeah.
In American cities, it's
Don't you feel bad for the LA after the Paris Olympics?
They've got a very high bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, the Pacific Ocean is maybe slightly more swimmable than the Seine.
It's true.
As an ocean swimmer, I'm more stoked to swim here than in the Seine.
That is very true. We do have the beach. That is where we have them beat. But in terms of urban planning and buildings and beautiful architecture, and the thing I appreciate in Europe and like Milan or Paris, where people still really love fashion. They love looking good. They love dressing nice. They love the art of self-presentation.
Yeah, here we're just overrun with athleisure.
Right. And I think, I don't know, I always loved how my dad dressed. My father was always very dapper and presented. I think maybe that generation as well of our parents,
And
they were more concerned.
Is he from Mexico?
He was born in the States. His parents were from Mexico, but grew up at a time when being a Mexican kid in a small town in Indiana, you really had to assimilate. You really had to, and I think it was also just the time people really presented themselves it was very important to present themselves in a certain way. It's the way that they dressed. So I always appreciated that about my dad, that he dressed so nicely.
You've got a specific kind of cultural point of view when it comes to building your company and showing up as a leader. And so could you tell us about your leadership philosophy and how you think about, in your mission, a kind, collaborative workplace, and what practices you've put in place to enable that?
Having started the brand very organically, meaning I started out of my house, had 1 employee, then 2 employees, then 3 employees, and never having had a business before. I had never run a business. I had never worked for a big business. Didn't know much about corporate culture. So I had nothing to hold it to. I wasn't trying to emulate anything as I was building this company. The only thing that I wanted was to have a kind environment, a place where people wanted to come work and where I wanted to go work. And I'm not a very high strung person. I don't get angry. I don't throw things. There's all these funny stories about like designers like throwing things and having these big temper tantrums when things don't go right. And things don't go right all the time in production. There's just problem after problem after problem. And I think my temperament suits me well that I don't get so upset about it. I know that we're not curing cancer, and thankfully no one is dying when mistakes are happening. And we just take it as it comes, and we try to find the best solution for whatever problem is coming our way. So I think it's this culture, what has now developed into a culture, as now we're a company of 100 and maybe 20 employees, I think. I think it's my passion for the product and for our stores and for our aesthetic and for our message kind of is trickling down into the people who work there. I think also I've had a team that a lot of people have been there for a number of years. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years people have been there.
That's impressive in today's day and age.
I have a lot of girlfriends. I don't like cattiness. I don't like people talking about other people behind their back. So I think that's something that we kind of instill, and there's a transparency and honesty, and there's not a lot of ego associated with my position. If someone has a different point of view from me, I'm happy to hear what it is. If they don't like a certain design, tell me why you don't like the design. What do you think of it? Sometimes I'm very open to the conversation. We had an event today at work where a woman is leaving. So we had a little going away party for her at lunchtime, and she's leaving because she has to go take care of her father who's not well. So she's moving back to her hometown, and oddly emotional because I didn't really think of it, but I really like this person, and she's been great at her job, and she's the leader of her team. And it was oddly emotional to say goodbye to someone who didn't want to be leaving, but was leaving for
it's a different feeling.
Yeah.
It's not like you let them go, and it's not like they said, hey, I have better career prospects somewhere else. No, it's more like
it's life reasons. Yeah. And when life gets in the way, we're running these businesses, but we all have these really busy lives, and we have kids, and we have parents, and we have friends, and all these things that are bigger than our work environment or sometimes. And so it was emotional to say goodbye to her, probably because I know how important it is to go take care of your parents, and also what a gift that is, since when you don't have your parents anymore, you realize that it's a gift that you're able to do that. She spoke, and she's a very stoic person and not a very emotional person. And she started to cry, and she said, I just want you to know that of all the places that I've worked, this has been the most, the place with people the most passionate at every level that I've worked with. And everyone feels so personally connected to this brand. And it made me so emotional to hear that and to hear her say that. And it's interesting because I don't have that same comparison, because I haven't worked at a lot of other companies to compare that to. So it was really nice to hear that. And again, I think it probably comes from my just being a personal brand. It's coming from me. It's coming from my great team that I'm leading with, and they all feel extremely connected to it as well.
Yeah, it's rare to create something that is so consequential in another person's life. We do a lot to insulate and protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And to not be vulnerable, especially in commercial and professional situations.
Yeah.
And the fact that your environment and the culture that was created under your leadership was consequential to her is very powerful.
Yeah.
We need more leaders like you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I also see it in the customers when I have that interaction with, again, because it's top of mind and we just had that sample sale, I see the emotion in people's expression when they're talking to me. It means something to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they feel seen.
Yeah.
And they get to take this little package of energy and turn it into a badge and project it into the world. And you help them to tell the world who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful role that you play.
I like the way you just said that. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about what we wear means. And of course, I'm a believer in self-expression through, our apparel and what we wear. But I like how you just put that. You help people. What did you say?
Tell the world who they are.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the power of the immediacy of clothing and costume.
Yeah.
Right. And fashion almost suggests something else, like it's about cycles and it's about trends. But, but apparel is the most immediate way to tell the rest of the world who you are.
Yeah.
And I am an aspiring garçon.
Oui, garçon.
You use Clare V, the brand, as a platform for causes that are important to you. And one might say political statements. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, it occurred to me about, let's see, maybe 9 years ago now, that the company was profitable year over year. And I was kind of feeling like, okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's more rare than people realize.
Thank you. We were on a roll, and I felt like it occurred to me like, oh, you know what I could do now? I could start giving back. This is it. I can start donating. I can start collaborating with organizations that I care about and finding ways to give back to different causes. Mm-hmm. And Planned Parenthood was the first organization that we teamed up with. And for me, women's healthcare is very important. Planned Parenthood is primarily a health clinic. I know people always associate it with abortion services, but abortion services are about 2 to 3% of the care that they give.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, around the country.
Did not realize that.
Very small percentage of the care.
So people go to Planned Parenthood for
health services, reproductive health services. So any, women are supposed to get gynecological exam every year. Mm-hmm. So.
And is it provided free of charge?
No.
No. Do they take insurance?
They probably take insurance. I'm not sure what they do now.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I'm
they
just
take
curious
insurance.
about because that's a new fact
I know that
for me,
I used to go there when I was in college. Mm-hmm. That was my health clinic. Mm-hmm. I don't know. If I had to have my gynecological exam, I would go to Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. Anytime you want to get tested for any kind of anything to do with your sexual being, you should you can go to Planned Parenthood. Mm. Anyway, that was something that I was happy to give back to. And then very soon after that, I met Christy Turlington and her organization, Every Mother Counts. Mm-hmm. And being a mom, I knew that I was already passionate about what she was doing, which was making sure that maternal health care was available and safe to women all over the world. And my sister, who I'm very close with, has been a nurse in labor and delivery for the last 30 years. And for just many reasons, this organization resonated with me. So since 2015, we've been working with Every Mother Counts on different capsule collections every year and giving back a percentage of proceeds. My parents were big activists, I would say. They were activists. Mm-hmm. We just grew up in the household where we knew that it was our responsibility to give back and to serve the community in whatever way that we could. My father was Mexican and very active in the civil rights movement, and then my mom was always very active in various anti-war movements and nonviolent and peace movements. And they were role models for me to open my eyes to what's around us, and to not live in a bubble. We live in a community, and how can we give back to it? And, whether that's our local community or our larger country or world community. So we're happy. I'm very happy that I'm able to be a part of that with Clare V. I'm very conscientious of the fact that I also run a business and I have a lot of employees, and I want to be the best provider for this business and keep things running. And I don't want to alienate people. I don't want to alienate employees, and I don't want to alienate customers. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, maybe that's every town for gun safety, being a mom, and just being a sentient being in this country, I feel like, guns are a problem, and I'm happy that we're able to get the message out that there's too much gun violence, there's too many mass shootings. It doesn't happen in other countries, There's something that could be done about it.
Yes.
So
shockingly controversial.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're succeeding from a business perspective against the odds. I was in the food business. I work with a lot of different consumer businesses, and apparel is one that I haven't touched. Mm-hmm. And apparel is one that is really famously very difficult. Mm-hmm. You have fashion risk, you have sizes, you have colors, you've got seasons, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think about, if I make a hit mayonnaise, all I have to do is just produce that one mayonnaise, like eat year in and year out.
Yep.
But if I make a bag, like the cooler it gets, in some ways, the less cool it's going to get, right? And so I don't want to get ahead of myself, but talk to us about the business model of fashion and the retail business, and some of the nuts and bolts of what matters and how you make it work.
We are primarily handbags. A lot of fashion companies will design completely new collections for each season. I mean, they'll have their hits. So they'll, sweaters that they can repeat or pants they can repeat, thankfully. But handbags, you can repeat a lot of styles. Change materials with the different times and change fabrications. For example, right now we do a lot of woven leathers. That is, I see a woven leather bag over there. Yeah. That's something that's really prevalent in their fashion landscape right now. But so we can change materialation, but that's not a word, is it? Materialation. We can change.
You just coined that term.
I know. I like it. Materialation.
Yeah.
Change materials, but you can keep a lot of the same styles. Fashion apparel is extremely difficult. One of the problems that comes to mind with apparel is the minimums that happens. And this is why it's very hard for people to just start their own companies, and why I was lucky that I found my small family-owned factory here in Los Angeles to start my company, because I wasn't subjected to minimums. They let me produce the number that I needed. And it was pretty much made on demand from my website, which was very unusual and helped me a lot in the beginning. But when you get into the apparel minimums, it's terrible for our environment. It's terrible for the cash flow of the company. It's a lot of cash outlay to buy these minimums.
And then what about retail? Like you said, you have how many stores now?
14.
14 stores.
Yeah.
And talk to us about the selection. How do you determine square footage? How do you plan and forecast what you want to merchandise them with?
Yeah. I started everything so grassroots, and I just love that, because when you start off with what you actually need, you can grow from there. So my first store I opened with my neighbor. It was called Vivier in Bentley, and it was on Mitchell-Torena Street, 2 stores up from where my flagship store is now.
Oh, cool.
But Catherine Bentley is a jewelry designer. She was my neighbor. We needed to move our businesses out of our homes. So we moved into this retail space, and we called it Vivier in Bentley. The first third of the store with the retail window was our first retail location. And worked so well that we were like, oh, this is cool. I could probably move out. We could separate our businesses. The place at the corner became available. I moved down and opened my first Clare V store.
Which became your flagship.
That became my flagship. But you see, we started with 300 feet. My flagship was 450 feet, but great location on the corner of Sunset, Mitchell, Terena, and Silver Lake. Just thousands of people passing by on Sunset Boulevard every day. Second location was in New York City. Same amount of square footage, same 450 because it had worked, tiny, but it worked in Los Angeles, so it's going to work in New York. That worked well. A little bit bigger for the next store, which was in Santa Monica. Maybe that's 600 square feet. So each store we know what works for us. For a little while, we were like, 650, 700 square feet works for us. Now we're getting to the point where we're like, okay, now we need 1,100, 1,200 square feet because now we know we need a dressing room. We're selling more apparel. But I love that we are doing this in a very organic way, and we've been able to just see how much space we actually need and never, biting off more than we can chew.
And do you find that customers know roughly what they want when they walk in, and it's kind of more of a sniper approach on an item basis? Is it more like, I want something from Clare V, or do you see that you have street traffic comes in, they discover Clare V?
There's a lot of both, which is why I love being in the walking communities. I love, there's the women who come in and they've seen something on Instagram. They watch our Instagram live show or something, so they come in directly for something that they've just seen. But there's also the people who are just walking down the street. I love it when people walk in and they're like, "What's Clare V?"
Yeah.
And maybe I'm in the back and I'm listening to them and they're like, "What is that? This is pretty. What is this? What is this line? I've never heard of it." And I love that. It's this sense of
must be so satisfying.
Yeah,
because there's this magnetism.
Yeah, and that they like it and they're like, "This is beautiful." And then you get this opportunity to introduce a new person to the line.
And you come out from the back and you're like, "Clare V has arrived."
No, nothing.
No, of course not. Of course not.
That weird, but sometimes they'll be like, they'll say, "Is Clare a person?" And they're like, "Yeah, she's right here." And I'll come out and I'll talk to them. But
yeah, very cool. This is our kind of quick fire round. Short, quick answers. Don't overthink it. I ask everyone this question to start out with, which is, are you glad social media exists, or do you wish it never existed?
I think I'm glad that it exists because it has provided a platform for me to market my company. I started with a blog and then I moved into Instagram, and I think it's a way for people without big money, big corporate money to be able to market themselves.
Yeah, that's true. It is a way for the truth to get out there. Yeah.
Now, as a mom and as a sentient feeling person, I do have a lot of regrets as that it exists as well.
Yeah, I hear that. Sometimes I feel like I'm less sentient after my eyes have glazed over on various feeds.
Yeah.
Let's say a new employee joins Clare V and you hand them a user manual about how to work with you. What are the 3 most important headlines?
They should know that I appreciate honesty, and I appreciate eye contact. I appreciate people saying hello and goodbye and being kind and having manners. I appreciate hardworking people so much. I love it when people hustle because I hustle, and I love an attitude of get shit done. I think I worked for a while in production in LA. And I think when you've worked in production in LA, you realize that you don't say no, you just figure out a way to get it done. It's like you're making any movie or TV show or photo shoot or whatever, you get it done. And guess what? In LA, you can get it done.
Yes.
You can probably just about anything, you can get it done.
Yes.
So I love the attitude of get it done.
Love that. Most underrated activity in LA if you're traveling here?
There's a book called the Hidden Staircases of LA. And I love walking, and I love walking around all of our different neighborhoods. And this book has walks that you can take of the different staircases in all of our neighborhoods, because of throughout all the hills in Santa Monica or Silver Lake or Echo Park or Legion, anywhere. You can look up whatever neighborhood, and there's going to be all of these walks that you can take, and they kind of feel like scavenger hunts, because you start at a certain address. It'll tell you to walk 400 feet and look to your right. There will be a staircase. Walk up the staircase, and when you get to the top of the hill, take a left and walk. And it's a really fun activity to do, not only with kids or with your friends, but also great to do with tourists, because the views are always amazing. And also, if you're interested in homes and architecture, you can look at so many different homes and look at how people actually live in this town. So I think that's a great thing to do.
I love that. Yeah, I love walking LA.
Yeah.
And most people don't even think you can walk here. So that we're going to look out for that book.
The hidden staircases. I wish I would have brought it for you. It's a great gift to give people.
Well, thank you. Most underrated activity in Paris, if you're traveling there.
Ooh. Everything I'm thinking of is not underrated. I really love renting bikes in Paris. So maybe everyone doesn't do that, but
that's a great answer.
Yeah. I love riding bikes.
I think a lot of people are afraid to ride bicycles in major cities.
Yeah, but Paris is such a city that has such a vibrant biking culture that people are a little more mindful, I find. Drivers are more mindful. And there are just so many cyclists in Paris. Yes. But it's such a beautiful way to see the city. And you can travel the entire city that way.
Absolutely. And along the river is incredible. And they even have like special lanes for the bikes in certain busy places that have different special stoplights and things.
Yes.
It's a great
I love it. And the Vélib situation of the bike rental has gotten
rent it with your phone.
A lot. It's gotten a lot easier, because at the beginning when they had Vélib, it was very hard to rent with a foreign credit card, and now you can do it very easily. And
the Vélib, the French, we'll call French city bikes, they even have a strap for your phone too, so you can use Google Maps with your phone right on there instead of like bumbling like a like you're about to crash. So what is a current fashion trend that you can't stand? And I know you're a positive person that celebrates people's self-expression. I am, so it's hard for me to say that. So you can pass if you want, but is there something that's on your nerves? I'm sure there is, but I can't think of it. There's like, I hesitate to say anything, because people expressing themselves, they can do whatever they want. I don't know. Okay, there's things that I don't like, but I'm not going to say it, because I feel like, why? Sure, I get it. What's a book you'd recommend to the audience? Well, my favorite book this summer, and I think it's on a lot of women's favorite book of the summer, was All Fours by Miranda July. And I love Miranda. I think she's one of our great minds of our generation. She's a local woman. She's LA, Silver Lake, great filmmaker, but just also a very funny, but smart and observant. And it's a fiction book, and it's I highly recommend it. And it's about a woman who's approaching perimenopause. And but it's very funny and very deep at the same time. Wonderful. Is there an artist or creative that inspires you? Maybe someone inspires you now, or that's inspired your work in the past? So many artists inspire me. I mean, we're constantly looking to art and to artists themselves as inspiration, because we're designing new collections, and we're, often we have to encapsulate where our design is coming from. So we'll seek out different, the histories of different artists and their past works and things like that. Recently, I've been in love with Alice Neal's portraiture. She had a show at the Met many years ago, a couple years ago, which I really loved. Now she has a show at David's Warner, or there is an Alice Neal show at David's Warner here in LA, the gallery. So yeah, I'm always looking at, mostly female artists for inspiration.
writers, smart people, comedians, fun people. I don't know.
Beautiful. Favorite French film?
I don't know. I'll just say Jules Jim.
Okay, great. Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
Jules and
I
Jim.
love how much there is for me to read, to see, to watch.
Jules and Jim.
Yeah, I will check that one out, and we'll put the link in the show notes. And then we ask everyone for one good recipe. If you could walk us through in cookbook level detail, enough detail that someone could reproduce this at home, what's a go-to recipe that you love to cook?
That's so funny. I love to make smashed potatoes with a I guess it's kind of a chimichurri. I don't really know what a chimichurri is, but here's what I do. Mm-hmm. You boil the small potatoes, you boil the small potatoes, and then you, when they're soft, you take them out, put them on a baking sheet, mm-hmm. and you take the bottom of a glass and you smash them. Mm-hmm. Then you douse them all with a ton of olive oil, and then put them in the oven to roast. So there's more surface level to get them crispy. And then I take like a whole bunch of flat leaf parsley and chop it with one jalapeno, the zest of an entire lemon and the juice of an entire lemon, mince like 1 or 2 garlic cloves, and a bunch of olive oil and salt and pepper. And that is the like yummy little, that's what I'm calling chimichurri. I don't know what that is.
It's what you've described is almost identical to chimichurri, except classic chimichurri also has cilantro.
Oh.
So it's parsley and cilantro.
Oh, okay.
But also, I mean, who's counting? Like, I think we can consider this chimichurri.
Yeah. And I would probably do I'll do cilantro too. That sounds delicious.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a chimichurri.
So yeah, so easy, but like we'll do that often. It's an easy thing to cook once a week to eat with any type of meat or fish.
I think you're inspiring me to make that tonight, actually.
Yeah.
Because I love those smashed potatoes.
Yeah, I love anything with lemon zest and jalapeno, like having that little bit of heat, but having the zestiness from lemon.
Beautiful. And where can people find you? I mean, how can they follow you? How can they follow Clare V?
I'm like in Frogtown.
Get your wisdom. Yeah.
At Clare Vivier on Instagram is a good way. On Substack, I have a Substack called La Vie de Clare V. Mm-hmm. Where else am I?
You can pick up your La Vie de Clare V Rizzoli book as well.
Yep. And then you can just generally find me in Silver Lake because that's where I am, and maybe walking around the reservoir or
finding a special hidden staircase.
Yeah.
Right up that reservoir.
Yeah.
I know that one well.
Well, there's a bunch of them around the reservoir.
I got to get the book then.
Well, a few of them. And then in both sides of the reservoir.
Fun.
Yeah, really fun.
Well, thank you, Clare. It was a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to At Large. Today's episode was produced by Sick Bird Productions. Our theme song is Son of Sanford by Motion Worker. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and by email at atlargeshow.com. Follow me at SWH Norton on Instagram and Twitter, and DM me about the guests you want to hear on the show.